And it's starting recording. It's there. We're all into it today. So our topic for today is, we just said for sure 100% was, I can't remember what was our topic. It was,
I ain't even know.
I think the topic was something around what are the core digital assets, the assets. I like, and we can even just get into the word, what is an asset? But those are interesting conversations as well, because most companies don't think in terms of asset development in a lot of cases, but which is really great. But that's kind of the idea is there are some core assets, some lasting things that you have to be in business at all, to really be in business at all, and to make it, to be able to make it so that not only are people, so that you can make it so that anybody that you touch with your business can easily do business with you. That's kind of what I'm talking about. If you don't have these basics, and I know because I haven't had them, right? I've had them missing often, and it's very difficult because no matter how good you are or what skills you have or what kind of capabilities you could offer for somebody has the exact kind of problems that you're good at, you don't make that connection. You can't make that. And that's really what marketing and sales is all about, right? How do we connect with people in a really interesting way with what they need and what we have? And obviously people are going through the sales cycle, as we know. They're going 80% through it themselves, which is what social media and other things are helping to set up to do. But I just wanted to, I don't know, just kind of open that up. And
yeah, it's kind of like not just real estate. I think of digital real estate all the time. What is digital real estate? It's a list. It's a customer list. It's a prospect list. It's a software application. It's a website that gets traffic. It's content. All these different things are all kind of real estate on the interwebs.
Yeah.
But
I love that concept. I love that whole concept.
It better is assets, and the fact that, for example, I think one core asset to a business of any kind, digital or otherwise, is some sort of recurring revenue, and that's not necessarily real estate.
Ooh.
It can be.
Sure, of course. But when you say recurring revenue, do you mean the system you developed that generates the recurring revenue as the asset?
Yeah, I'd say that a business that does not have recurring revenue is not viable. I mean, it can be if you have, a sales staff and they are regularly out there pounding the streets and making it so the business has recurring revenue, and the fact that they have a sales staff that causes it to happen.
Yeah.
But I'd say a much more valuable business is one that has a recurring income base.
Absolutely, and especially in the, and it's good. There are several companies that are out there that have that reoccurring, but it's how they have it that makes the difference. So they have it, but if somebody leaves the company, it's gone. Right, and that's the kind of the one of the, that's why I got into the word asset more so. So that was an asset, but it was a weak asset. It's always an asset. It's a person you have sitting over under human capital, right? That's human capital within your organization that you're capitalizing on, or that they're using their skills to help the business capitalize on the opportunity in the marketplace. But when that leaves, so that ends up, when they leave, you realize one thing: that wasn't an asset of the company. That was an asset of that individual.
Well, and like you say, individuals are assets to the company.
Oh yeah, absolutely they are.
And your people are a big asset to your company, but you don't own them, unfortunately.
No, and that's actually good. Right. But see, this is what I like. Cool things like, did we ever talk about Joe? What's his last name? From Wikispeed. Joe from Wikispeed. His last name's escaped me right now. But the Wikispeed is such a cool thing because Wikispeed, Joe Namath came to my mind, so honestly I have a block. That's what ends up happening, right? So he's really great. I was, what a startup I was with previously, we went up and checked it out. But here he is. He's an agile consultant, right? He consults for a big company, John Deere, DoD, big companies. He helps them understand Agile and goes in and trains teams and things like that. Great reputation. But his WikiSpeed is a personal project that's grown to, it's a worldwide concept, and he allows people to duplicate what he's doing here in his garage, anywhere in the world. Okay, what is he doing in his garage? Well, his garage, which is a big metal structure that he has rented out. Or I think he gets it for nothing actually, but it's great. It's got several bays on it, etc. It's a pretty big shop. He builds cars. Right, he builds these cars, and the cars take parts, and they take tools, and they take knowledge of how to do each piece of the car, and they take humans. Right. Well, what's great about this is, we'll get to the point, right, is that every week he spends a half an hour training people on the Agile process within the company, on how it works, and this is the first time they learn it. And then the people go out and they actually work on a car for the next like 2.5 hours. And they actually are building the cars. The cars are completely built by a volunteer workforce, by people who typically never worked on a car before. Right? Very interesting. Well, what Agile has done in that case is converted, if you will, the intrinsic knowledge from people who were figured out how to do the things they need to do into extrinsic knowledge. So WikiSpeed, all of the knowledge is all those assets are part of WikiSpeed. So the people become, not that people aren't less important, is the wrong way to say it, because we don't want to dehumanize, but we're enabling a whole new group of people to come in and have different perspectives and try it out. And what ends up happening is, when you bring a different perspective into something you've never done, you end up thinking about it differently, and you end up making innovations that you never expected. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
it's a cool concept.
Plus, if you separate the process and the system from the people, and then obviously, like you say, you can have a new person plugged into that job in half an hour. So
plugged into a half an hour with a new perspective doesn't mean they can't get better over time, and you can get other kinds of efficiencies of scale and all kinds of stuff. It's not to say that people are going to be becoming less and less important. That's not it at all. Just that when you're developing a company, the more things you can do without people. In fact, what we're already finding is we have 7 million jobs openings in the United States, right? With 3.5 million people looking right now, right? So we have double the amount, right? So we're going to keep running into that. There's always been, when I was in 2008 running a startup, we always had this issue with talent shortage. Not skill shortage. I put skills below the line and talent above the line in this really simple model, because what was happening was skills were available everywhere, but talent wasn't available. And article after article in the depression in 2008, it wasn't quite a depression, but it was bad, right? It was the worst of our lifetime, right?
Yeah.
Not close, maybe the 70s. The 70s, we had some of that with the gas crisis and stuff. We had some, I was younger then. So, I don't know, a couple of years, but at any rate, anyway, very, very interesting. Where was I going with that?
The jobs and the talent. Talent's above the line.
Oh yeah, talent's above the line. So see, that's why I was going with that talent. I got lost in my thought was going off somewhere else. The talent, what we were able to understand is that they couldn't find enough talented people in their organizations. So we had tons of skills available everywhere in the U.S. and worldwide. There was a huge amount of a high demand for jobs, and unemployment was incredibly high. But yet there's a shortage all over the place. And people weren't looking at that. And what I figured out was, for talent are, I just made a really simple thing. Talent are people who have a perspective, a point of view, a POV. This is where point of view comes in. Anybody's listening, this is the important part, right? Point of view on how the work gets done, or point of view on the work itself, is what constitutes talent. I know it's a simple thing I'm saying, but trust me, that came from a lot of work and trying to figure this thing out with a lot of really smart people. But that's what it comes down to, is just that is that simple thing. And that's what we're trying to get to as a society, is if you can set your jobs up that way inside, I'm blocking myself, inside your company, and you can move your systems so that you need skills-based people, which skills-based people, the amount it costs for the skills-based people is going way down. And then you can spend the rest of your time on talent-based people to continue to add new value to the market like crazy. And which is where every company needs to be. And that's what Wikispeed is basically. It's just an instantiation of that kind of a thing. So I don't know. So does that connect back to core assets?
Well, we are talking about, employees as quote unquote assets too. So that's all
they are
together, and yeah, it's amazing how you can leverage talent with good employees, good skillful employees. So you have one person that has a lot of talent, handing work to a bunch of people that are skilled at the things to execute what they're good at, what the talented person is good at feeding to them.
Absolutely. And if you're set up right as a company and a culture, you're constantly helping people at a skills-based level to understand who they are and give them the opportunity to come up above the line into the talent-based organization. Most companies don't know there's a distinction, so they're not doing that. In fact, a lot of people get branded. I know that everybody's going to connect with that inside a large corporation. People kind of get branded for who they are and what they are, and people don't see the changes that go on in them, and so they end up getting frustrated and leaving eventually. Right, that ends up happening. Or they get promoted into positions that they really aren't available for. That happens as well because they may be extraordinarily talented about claiming what they've done, and eventually they get found out that that was not them. I spent a long time in corporations, so I kind of know how those things work. Yeah. Oh Lord.
Yeah, that happened to me back in the day a lot. I would be very good at something, and I'd be the best in the organization in something, and then they'd promote me into management. I'm like, but I was really good at that.
Right. Well, and then how'd you do with management?
Oh, I was good at management too, but I was much better at actually selling stuff.
Well, that's a good point, and the point about that also is that being able to recognize how to leverage that talent in a way, and so to be able to get people who are really good at something and allow them to grow. So I'm going to get into intellectual capital discussion a little bit, which this is a little bit. That may be going down the rabbit hole a little bit, but the idea is, what was the company? Rooster Teeth, yeah, gaming company, right? Rooster Teeth, I believe, is a company that develops superstars inside their celebrities inside their company. They become the celebrities that are professionals at watching games. Are they watching the games or playing them? I can't remember if they're watching them or playing them. Okay, I don't remember which one because I obviously it's my son's site, right? He's a hardcore gamer, right? But that's the whole point. So the interesting thing about the company is that they have a really good process for people to come in and become celebrities in the marketplace, and people pay for the service of watching them play or them watching or watching them watch people play or something like that, however that works. And there's a precise explanation for you. And but what's interesting is they get a big head. These people, they get really well known on the internet, and they get lots of followers with these amazing comments, and it goes to their head. Not all the time, but a lot of times it goes to their head. And they think, you know what? I'm making a salary over here. I'm out. I'm going to go do this on my own. The people love me. I'm fantastic. I'm amazing, right? They leave. Big explosion. Nothing happens. Mm-hmm. They can't do it. It's an interesting thing. Why not, right? And in comes another person, takes their place, and they're a superstar again, right? That's the company. That's similar to the agile experience, but that's exactly it. Is they are very good at. They have a system and a capability to bring people in, to up level them, and to get them to move into these into these amazing places. But it's their system, and the people mistook it for themselves.
Mm. And that's the intellectual capital.
That's the intellectual capital. So what you're trying to do, so intellectual capital, which I used incorrectly for years and years and years, breaks into three. It's basically a company has two kinds of things. They have a capital that's the balance sheet, everything on the balance sheet side of the house, and then they have we call those tangible assets on the balance sheet, things you can actually count, do something with, and then they have this other thing called these intangible assets, right? And intangible assets is interchangeable with intellectual capital. It's the same thing. It's the intangible things you're doing. Like a sales system is an intangible asset, right? But it generates, right, tangible assets by when you use it, kind of a thing, right? So how much is your sales system worth? That's a hard question for people to answer, or it used to be. Now people, that's what the whole idea around intellectual capital is. And what CEOs don't realize, just in general, is they're playing a game. Their game isn't to grow tangible assets. I mean, it is, but that's an outside in approach. That's a lagging indicator. You did something amazing that turned into revenue. So that's why, in fact, I just did a webinar on accounting versus finance, right? Accounting is the past. Finance is about the future. It's about creating value and what you're doing in the marketplace and what opportunities there are. And so that's the whole point, is they're playing a game. And I think of it, I set it up for CEOs like a spreadsheet. I say, look, you're used to a spreadsheet and a balance sheet, right? Where you have, you put numbers down in a left column, and then you put your assets down, and you put your liabilities, subtract them, you get all the, you get your how much your actual worth, what your valuation is. Well, think of it this way in intellectual capital. On the left-hand side, you list all of your intellectual capital out, and then in the other columns, you put what does 2x, 5x, and 10x look like on those assets. So let's take a look at the human capital, which is one of the forms of intellectual capital, is human capital. There's three forms: human, structural, and relational. Those are the three forms of intellectual capital. Well, in human capital, the question isn't do you have a great person in that role? It's that person in that role is a value of X. However you determine the value, whatever it is, you say it's X. How do I move that person's value in my company to 100X? How do I do that, right? And those are the kind of strategies you begin to develop around developing these really interesting assets. And when you can begin to think that way, you're going, oh, wait a second. If I take what that person is doing in sales, and I follow him around, and I videotape him doing it, I can create a training asset where I can train other salespeople to do what he does, right? And how much is that worth? What you've just taken your value that you were delivering, you've turned it from intrinsic to extrinsic, it's called. But we've just taken your value and began to increase it in the company. Or if you do something like we're going to have our sales guy go and deliver a session at our corporate yearly meeting on sales to a group of 400 salespeople. That's another example of being able to leverage you in a completely different manner. And when you're being leveraged in those kind of ways, not only are you more valuable to the company, but you're more valuable from your return on that value should go up as well. Mm-hmm. Demonstrably. That's why if you ever get a chance to present for a company and do those kinds of things, right? Make sure you're reaping the benefits of that, right? Why do you want me on stage doing that work? And what does that mean that what do I have that I'm helping to grow as part of this company in a different way? I don't know. Does that make sense? It's a little bit of a
mostly definitely. I mean, I'm more on the lines. See, I focus on, like I said, real estate,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And digital real estate. You introduced me to that concept.
Yeah.
It's blown me away.
Assets are far more than just real estate,
Yeah.
Intellectual capital, human capital. I mean, there's tons of stuff that's less tangible than like real estate. For me, it's a prospect list, it's a customer list, it's a product line, it's I think of those things as assets.
They are, and those sit in structural capital. You've nailed it. And structural capital is a strange category because it includes lots of things. If all of your IP, you're talking about IP, your intellectual property, absolutely 100% fits in there. Also things like culture, your culture fits in there, right? And people they don't understand that the value of their culture, it's the last remaining competitive advantage as an example. And they don't get that by having an undocumented culture, the culture has value, but it only has value because it exists. But if you take a company like Netflix, the HR director realized we have an amazing capability here and a culture people love. One of the things they used to do is they would give you a raise based on they were able to calculate your worth outside the company every year. And I think they still do this. And they come back, and every year when they do the evaluation on what you're worth outside the company, if you're worth more outside the company this year than you were last year, they give you a raise to that so you don't leave.
Yeah, it's a Interesting concept.
It is. So the HR director goes, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do roadshows on this stuff. So they take their whole, not just that part, but their whole culture, and they go out and they talk about it. Zappos has a whole program that they charge CEOs to come into their company and they teach them their culture. I mean, it's crazy because they've gotten very famous with their culture because they were the first one to go to Holacracy overall, and they've done a bunch of stuff. Their manifesto was amazing originally, but they backtrack now. They're back. They backtrack. For me, as an anti-value person, as you know, we talked about that before, right? They backtracked from manifesto, which is I think the wave of the future, something that's meaningful and movement that you're a part of, that you're doing something that's going to make a difference, to values. They've now reinterpreted their manifesto as a set of values.
No, yeah, that's a big backtrack.
It's yesterday's news, but yeah, which we could talk about that at some other time too. So I know we're going all over on this, aren't we? We're doing it again.
A little bit. But for me, the place where the word value actually belongs is probably in the manifesto, and that's how much value can your company bring to the internal and external customer. The external customer being, of course, the traditional customer, but the internal customer being your people and your staff and your community. So bringing value, I think, is like the core of any business manifesto.
Bringing value is 100%. Yeah, that's where the term kind of gets confused and misused and all over. So to your point, there's no other reason to get up in the morning, right? Other than to be able to create value. But when you start getting into values, because my problem is I know how those started, because they started as lipstick on a pig. Evil corporations saying we're not evil, right?
Don't be evil.
They're saying we're not evil. Look, we're honest and we have integrity and we have all kinds of stuff that's pretty good. Right? It's a Frank Kurdish, right? It's pretty good inside here.
pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's good. And the reality is, no, they're not honest. They have no integrity. They're evil. They're evil bastards trying to suck the blood out of the marketplace because they can't innovate anymore. So now all they're doing is hiring a bunch of MBAs to come around and drive a financial result based on models that crush employees and harm customers and just joke.
Don't be evil. It's
evil. Yeah,
one of the worst mottos for a company I've ever heard.
Yeah, don't be evil.
well,
I was thinking,
at least we're not being evil,
right?
It's like, no, you're pretty much planting the thought in someone's head that we should be evil, but just don't let anybody know about it.
Exactly. That's funny. What popped in my head when you said that was Saturday Night Live. We keep going back. You know what I'm talking about, right? Who made you do that? Satan? Remember that? It was Satan.
Could it be?
Oh, Lordy. All good. Yeah. So assets are something that that I think it's essentially that's the game that every single company is playing. I don't think that they know that they're playing that. And there's a core set of assets I think you need in the marketplace. And you mentioned the assets of, I need to be able to generate revenue, which I would call, you might be able to call that the sales system, but it's much more than that, because sales system doesn't generate revenue because you can't get into that without a marketing system, right? So in fact, at Colored Boxes, I try to go convert, acquisition, conversion, fulfillment, and support, kind of a deal, right? Where you need to be able to acquire customers, convert them in some logical way, and I try to put it more in an asset term. I used to say marketing, sales, and development. I have a whole program called MSD, which is really interesting. But I just think the updated Colored Boxes has completely morphed from what that was, and it's much more modern, and it's more than version 2.0. It's like version 3.0. It's like.
You and your version 3s.
I know, I skipped it. Everything I do has to be in 3 versions. That's from my days at Microsoft.
Just like Microsoft,
100%. That's my one.
DOS 2.0 wasn't anything.
Stop. Windows 2.0 wasn't anything. Actually, it was barely okay with Windows 3.0. Even though Windows 3.0, so I supported Windows 3.0 back in the day. When it first shipped, and customers would call up and say, "Yeah, you got to help me. I'm having to reboot my computer like 5 times a day because it was buggy as crap. Buggy like crap. It doesn't surprise you, but I mean, it's really buggy, right? Horribly. And we'd say in support of, but the answer to that was, oh yeah, well let me take a look at your system because I want to find out what you're doing because like mine's rebooting 10 times a day. Wow.
Only 5? Wow.
Wow, you got, what are you doing? What kind of, I'm gonna have to buy one of your computers. That's great. That would happen as much. It was just, it was buggy. Oh my goodness. Today, if it was like, if the systems were like that today, I mean, everything runs on digital now, right? I mean, you couldn't talk on your damn phone if that was happening, you know?
It's true.
For a lot of companies, not all companies are that way, but yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, I have troubles listening to my Zune, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Zune. You remember that, huh?
I had one.
Well, so today I was never into them, but man, she loved it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course that came out before, that was before the iPod, right? Or was that right at the same time?
That was way before the iPod. Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to get into Microsoft, but I mean, just how many innovations have they screwed up that were in the market just lousy, right? They had the pad. We had WinPad back in the day, and now like pads are they're everything. You can't live without having a pad. You probably don't have a pad, right?
I sold my pad.
Oh, you did? You got rid of it?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, it's just I don't need it. I got a phone. I got a computer. I'm good.
Well, the phone is so powerful these days, absolutely. Yeah. But I like browsing on. I do like browsing on the damn thing. I admit it. There you go. Yeah, but they had all these things, and then you know what did they do? They squandered them. They squandered them all away, which is very interesting too. I mean, so let's think about that. We got to relate that into the asset discussion. We got to bring it back. Bring it back. You know.
Well, what were those? Those were assets of innovation. You know.
Yeah. And
so, innovation is innovation an asset, or is it an outgrowth of talent? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is innovation? And can it be assetized? You know,
yes.
Can you like create innovation in your company intentionally?
Was that a setup for me? You throwing me a softball?
I always do, man. I'm just here to make you talk.
You're just awesome. You're awesome. Yeah, no, because I mean, no, I don't want to go deep. I won't go too deep into that because I could just go off on that. Yeah, but absolutely, innovation is absolutely an asset, and anybody can innovate. The issue I'm running into with people is, and I'll make this one statement, and it gives the whole thing away. Really, is that thinking outside the box has killed more innovation than it's created. Because you're never creating, because it's just loosey-goosey everywhere. So R&Ds fail because their mission is to think outside the box. It's wrong. What you're doing is creating a new box, new parameters. But you got to, the parameters, all innovation comes from constraints. That's the whole methodology. I can teach it. I teach companies. I do it today. Colored Boxes was based on this, by the way, right? Because it's a box. So it's actually creating the whole idea is you're creating a new parameter, a new set of constraints. And every single time you go through the box, you're setting new constraints. So it's innovating constantly. And innovation is more left brain than right brain. Your right brain gets involved in it. The feeling of innovation is amazing, right? It's a great feeling you bring up. But here's where people get stuck is creativity is not innovation.
Mm.
But you could bring creativity to your innovation. But that's why I run into a lot of people because I start talking about innovation inside and you should look at, they're like, I can't innovate. I'm not, and that's not me. That's why I'm in this industry, Josh, because I can't innovate. It's like, no. You're confusing creativity with innovation. You're thinking you can't create. You can't bring that creativity. You don't like to think, you want to think more concretely. That still can be sitting. In fact, like I say, innovation is all about constraints. What are constraints? I mean, come on, that's an engineering term, right? You're totally in a different realm, and so that's why engineers can be some of the best innovators in the world, because they're looking at a group of constraints that are different from where they're sitting today without even knowing it. But that's the model I begin to go in and teach customers, because obviously that's the beginning place. There's a lot more depth to it than that, especially in terms of how to make it something that you can do all the time to turn it into an asset, which is what Colored Boxes does. Oh my! I never thought of it that way. The way you just said it, Colored Boxes turns innovation into an asset within your company that you can count on occurring every single day as an outcropping of operating. Wait a minute, you innovate as an outcropping of operating. That's, to me, I can't just walk out to the world and say that. Look at how hard that is. This is the asset thing I was talking about. The hard thing is that little concept right there is so incredibly powerful. And if CEOs can grasp what I'm talking about there, it's all over. There's no way they don't want that in their organization, because their organization will, it's rocket fuel. It's rocket fuel. But it's so hard. I can't just walk out and say that. They just look at me and scratch their head. What? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because they want to know the practical application of that. How do I do that then?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
which I've got.
So yeah, I know you got that. So
I do. I love that. Well, that's the thing. I always get it, because some people have said I have a high energy. I don't know why, but anyway,
what?
I know. It's like, what are you talking about? But they confuse that high energy and enthusiasm for life, for fluffiness, and I get that entirely, right? And so, in fact, I've had that criticism. It's interesting. No, Josh, but we need something really concrete. So then I start going down concrete, and they're just like, they get lost really quickly. They're like, oh wow, hold on a sec, because it's just I go high, big concept, and then real on deep. That's what I do. There you have it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, what we got to finish off assets.
Yep.
What other assets do modern businesses?
Well, so we kind of branch off into that, into the intellectual capital. But what I was thinking originally was kind of this core thing of you got to have a website that can provide an experience where they can not just tell what you do, but actually begin to experience what you're all about. Now, I think that kind of goes along with some of the Frank Kern talking about demonstrating value before they'll actually buy value from you, things that are valuable from you. But right. I think you need to start doing that. I think that every company needs to have at least a singular website that's an expression of who they are. And I do run into that often. I do an expose on websites for people where I can go up and I say, don't tell me anything about your website. Let me go look at it and tell you what customers will think of this, and who will be buying this and who won't be buying this, right? And I always come back with it, and this is by design, obviously, because I know what's going to happen. And I go, here's who you're attracting and why. And they're like, whoa, no, that's not who I want. That's not who I want. Are you getting those kind of customers? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's like
it's so simple that it's so simple. It's hard.
Absolutely.
It's like and Frank does break it down into very simple terms. You know, he goes through the best whatever series. You know, you have your best buyer. You got to know who your best buyer is. You got to know what is the best bait. What's your best bait to attract that buyer? You know,
right.
I mean, it's just breaking it down to be so simple is what you have to do in order to get people to buy into it, you know? So,
and to get to expression, because one of the problems is that you have to be able to get to the end. I call it simplicity. And this is exactly what Frank is analogous to Apple, and people would probably, if they knew that, they'd probably, what are you talking about? Those are they're very, very similar. And I compare Apple to Microsoft in the sense that Microsoft, to pick up a box, they've changed now. But in the old days, you pick up a box and there's words on every single side, every single little space is taken up and used. It's all over the place, right? That's called complexity. And there was a lot of value in Microsoft products, but it was so complex, very few people knew it existed.
Mm-hmm.
Even the ones who owned the product and used them all the time, right? They're, I didn't know that was there. You find stuff out, and like, it's crazy. They were real. That's why I say Microsoft was not a good marketing company, even though they were accused of being a great marketing company, and that's it. Apple, on the other hand, was always about what I call, my terminology for this, because I do presentations this way, I call it simplexity. And that is simplicity on the far side of complexity, right? That's an Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. quote. I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on the near side of complexity. That is before you get into it and understand it deeply, but I'd give my right arm for simplicity on the far side of complexity, right? Which is, that's what I call simplexity. Thought it was so clever. How many times have we ever done this, right? And so I go look for that. Of course, there's a book out called Simplexity, and there's like, I was like, oh, come on, folks, come on. I had a great idea. Don't you hate that? But that is the whole concept. Is you you got to get beyond all the value is sitting in complexity, but you've got to get to it at the other end. And that's why Frank is so amazing like Apple, because Apple spends more time doing their commercials, more money doing their commercials, right? And then they sit there and instead of they just sit there and they just rotate this thing around with this music playing and say, then at the very end, it's world's thinnest computer. Right? Well, I could have done that. No, they make it so simple, but no, you don't understand what it took to get there was really rigorous, right? Much more rigorous than Microsoft spends on their commercials that nobody will remember. They're forgotten. I can't get that one out of my head. Why? They get it, right? Frank gets it. That's what Frank does. And that's why Frank is the ultimate introvert. And I only know that from you telling me, right? But that's why he's the ultimate introvert, because what Frank has done is he goes into the deep end of the complexity, deep end of the complexity. And he ends up coming out the other side. He gets to the simplicity purpose. So when you hear him talk about it, it's like, oh, that's so simple. I can go do that, right? Actually, he breaks it down. He does make it simple too. Actually, he does. He delivers on that because he has gone through that detailed level of work. That's all.
Yeah, but it's always on. You're right. It's always on the far side of doing a deep dive. I mean, that's what he does when he's consulting. Well, that's what I do when I'm consulting. Is I go into a deep dive first. I mean, I had one client that didn't understand why it took me an entire month to come to any conclusions. And I'm like, it's taken me a month to figure out how your business runs, and find out how all the pieces work together, find out where all the bottlenecks are, where all the best leverage is. And then after a month, on paper, I haven't done anything, but at that point, I'm now on the far side of complexity. And I can tell you that if you would just email your list one more time a week, you'll double your revenue.
Exactly. I love that. That is exactly it. And in fact, I cheat that a little bit with colored boxes, because colored boxes as an organizational strategy allows me to get to understand them and break them apart, because we're redesigning the organization, going from what they were to what they're becoming. And so that's exactly how I cheat. But we're getting into really deep, complex things. We're getting into the details of their organization and what was good. And by the way, when you go down and deep and dive, what's interesting is you find out a lot of the details aren't there. Mm. And a lot of the stuff that they need to understand and know, to your point, it just comes falling out naturally. That you would never know ahead of time until you get in there. There's no way you're ever going to know that stuff.
Right. And you won't know it by just talking to the CEO. You got to talk to other people, because there's people in the organization that actually understand where the money's coming from.
Yeah.
It's not just on the spreadsheet.
Oh,
it's like they're like, oh no, Frank sells as many out the back door.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah. No, that's too true. So that's all good. Well, this has been good. It's been a long session.
Yeah. Sorry, went long.
No, we did go long, but the thing is that we've got this conversation could bleed so deep. There's so many things. We have several little outsprings from this that we could go into. It's just a super exciting topic. So hope everybody enjoyed this.
Yeah. Sometime we can talk about managing assets. How about that?
Let's do it. Oh, managing assets. Ooh, that's a great topic. No. I love that. Cool. All right. Until next time.
Thanks, man.
We have to create an ending slogan or something, Don't you think? Something like
that's the truth.
And that's the truth. Yeah, exactly. We'll how about that's it. That's it. We're done.
Okay.
That's it. All right. Oh, that's it. We're done. See ya.
And that's the end.
All right. Bye.